That's happy.
You look happy.
I don't know what. I was fine this morning. No, I was tired, but I was fine yesterday. I saw this doing nothing because it's been absolutely torrential here. Like, I woke up at 7 o'clock this morning and I could hear the rain, and I was like, well, I'm not doing any work today.
I wish I had that excuse, working at home, or for an office-based company. I wish I could say, it's raining. I don't think I'm going to do anything on my laptop today. I think I'd like that.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? Unfortunately, it just means that like this afternoon, I'm just not going to get paid because I haven't done any work.
Exactly.
And there's other stuff that's just like, well, I'll have to find time to do that another day.
I think this is why I'm not self-employed, because the temptation just to be like, well, I've got absolutely nobody asking me to do something. I need to really use my own initiative to gain income. I don't think I have that drive in me.
It really is a challenge sometimes. Fortunately, at the minute, work just seems to be kind of appearing. Like, I've never had to advertise for work. I imagine that's quite dreary, like having to go find people to give you work. Sounds tedious, but mostly it's just like referrals, or I've sold another one of those sets of stables on Etsy. I'm sure you saw yesterday.
I did.
Which is a fantastic website that just kind of like, you do the barest amount of work to put photos up and descriptions, and then people just buy things. It's fantastic.
They just give you money. It's just
you just give you money for the things that you've made, and you're like, huh, that's weird.
Do you want to? This episode brought to you by Dave's Stables. Do you want a set of kids' stables for their play horses?
Artisan, handcrafted.
Sorry, my ad read is not very good on this one. I don't really believe in the product, to be honest. So I don't have the.
Well, that's because, Sam, you aren't a 7-year-old girl, which is my target audience for these toys.
I'll sell you a Squarespace website.
Yeah, Squarespace.
This podcast.
How much ad money we'd get for doing? It would have to be all ads all the way through the podcast for us to make even pennies. I think, because it's based on like downloads, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a click per million or CPM. So basically, like for every 1,000 downloads is what they want to know. So if you can say we've got a CPM of 10, which means you've got 10,000 people downloading, then you'll get like $4 per that, or whatever it is. Like, it'll be a measly amount. So we probably make about
all adds up, I suppose. That's why around the NFL has like 40 ads at the beginning of them, and they're published by the NFL. So
I know. Well, they're advertising other NFL podcasts, and that's I guess
true.
Maybe the role there. Some of the which you haven't responded to, I'm very disappointed. Some of the improv ones I've been watching, they have ad breaks, but they are made up products. So they just basically do an advert for a made up product, and then build that into part of the content, which is really funny. It really makes me laugh.
I struggle with improv just a little. I think it tends to be, I guess it's like stand-up. I kind of have to not like instantly take a dislike to the person doing it, and that can be, obviously I'm an incredibly
for a judgmental prick like you, that's really difficult.
Judgmental prick, petty. I'm an incredibly petty individual, so I can take a dislike to somebody, especially like an improv
Look
person.
At his eyebrows. What a cunt.
For almost any reason. So I struggle with improv, because if I decided if I've decided I'm not bought in on your shtick, then it's kind of like, well, you could be like the greatest improv artist in the world, and I'm still going to be like,
yeah. I agree with you though. Improv, like, not generally, but actually, these worth watching. Some of these ones, I am very, very impressed by these people who can generate songs that rhyme, on the fly, like from nothing, and it's super cool. It is very cool to watch the creativity of that.
Well, it's impressive, like anything else that someone's good at. It's always like, oh, I wish I could do that. I wish I had talent.
Wish I had talent and drive.
Talent again.
Any ability, motivation.
It would be nice.
Talent. Instead, here we are, plowing the whitest of white guy fields by talking about
of white guy fields
movies.
Harry and I we're discussing at the weekend. This is funny. like basically our theory on I guess it's like a lot of things, but mainly that there's like a scale of age and gender, ethnicity, something like that, and basically like
Demographics.
demographics. There is a sharp increase in white men's self-confidence as the age goes up.
Oh yeah.
And we were discussing how essentially, like, if you are a white man in your 50s, you aren't necessarily any more right than anybody else in the entire, world, but you think you are.
Yeah.
Like, your self-confidence is at like plus 4,000 points. You can't possibly be wrong because you are a white man in your 50s. And white women as well can think they're very right as well, but white men have really, like, in a big bad way.
There's because they've by that point maybe you've achieved a relative amount of stability and success in your life. You've got a job, you've got your car. You're 5 or 10 years away from owning your house outright. You've got the ability to, it's a bit of fuck you money, and so you start throwing it around, and thus that translates to all of your opinions and your ability to drive as well.
Do you know what I'd love, Sam? I wouldn't even love
everything's. Go on.
I'd love fuck you money, but do you know what I'd love even more is like comfortably met my basic needs money. That's what our generation is striving for. Like, it's not fuck you money. It's not attacking anyone. We're just comfortably meet my basic needs.
Could I buy a bottle of wine like just whenever I wanted, and that wouldn't have to go, oh yeah, but what if I need next week? I want a bottle of wine. That's the money. That's the level that you want to achieve, isn't it?
Yes, your life that you measure by bottles of wine.
Yes,
what if I want a bottle of wine in the future? Not what if my children need shoes? What if I want a bottle of wine next week, but I've bought a bottle of wine this week?
These are the real realities. Sometimes my days are, I mean, not very happy, nice life, all that. But sometimes my days are like,
Nicola, he's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, it's fine. My days are like, oh man, I've got a massive bag of crisps at home. Oh, that's gonna top it off. And then football season comes along. It's like, oh, Sunday night, I've got a bag of crisps. I've got football, and that's gonna be enough. That's what's gonna get me through the week, which is really quite sad. But I think in a good way, because
the rest of the time it's grain alcohol.
Santori time. Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure we've got the Bill Murray ad read down. We'll work on it.
For good times, it's Suntory times. How's that?
Good times, try Suntory times.
And I like the ones when he's like that. It's a great thing.
It's something that I feel like adverts don't necessarily. Not that I watch loads of adverts, really, but I think ads are something that's like really fascinating to track, like through time.
Mm-hmm.
You've got stuff like what's really famous ads. All the Guinness ones are relatively big over here.
Yeah.
Banks tend to have quite weird adverts. Do you remember the Lloyd's one with the horses running?
Yes, by your side. No, that's nationwide, isn't it? The ones that I love are perfume adverts, because just even the most.
Do you like sex? Do you like money?
Spray this water on your skin. That's the short. And it's not even like there's a. They're even that explicit. Sometimes it's literally just random shit, totally random shit, and you think even the most ardent perfume fan, even someone who's like right into perfumes and must just walk away and go,
perfume.
What? I'm sorry.
What are you talking about? Yeah, I know what you mean. Huh? But I suppose it's like that diffuse sort of like I always think of that Futurama when the near future Futurama where they'll just beam adverts directly into our dreams.
Yes. Yeah.
And that subconscious like marketing of Fried by buying that underwear with like shoulder pads on them somehow.
Yeah.
On his underwear.
We're not far away from that. You see, in New York, they had drones.
The sky. We are monetizing the sky.
It's like Blade Runner. I'm surprised it's not happened sooner, to be honest. But it's like, but what I'm interested in is when one of those drones falls out of the sky and kills someone, because I think that's going to be an interesting
Yeah, I think it'd
test
be
of.
really interesting, Stan, how there'll be no accountability for that
Yeah,
whatsoever.
exactly. Real test for the legal system to do anything about that whatsoever.
Absolutely nothing.
Killed by an advert for dog food, fell out of the sky. Fantastic.
Fuck you. That's why. But it's like it's just a sign of the things, isn't it? Where ultimately money talks. So fuck you. What are you? Are you a billionaire? Well, then get fucked.
Shut up.
Shut up. You Jeff Bezos? Then no, get back in your fucking seat.
It's a bit of a hellscape, isn't it?
It's a dystopia. It really, really is a dystopia. But you know,
When does dystopia? Can we actually live in a dystopia, or is
as far as in
because
dystopia, just as in the actual meaning of the word, isn't it just the inverse of utopia?
well,
What's the actual definition?
speculated community or society that is undesirable or frightening. So I'm going to I'm going to challenge that to say that actually, can we are we in a dystopia, or is
Well, no, we
reality?
aren't,
No, hold
Sam.
on.
We
Is
aren't
reality
because
simply upsetting and frightening? And can we thus track it as a? Because we're not speculating. If only we lived in a dystopia, because we were looking ahead, going, that wouldn't be very nice. Whereas what we're doing right now is going, that isn't very nice.
I suppose, technically speaking, because the definition is like an imagined or it's not a real place. Because of this is reality. Yes, it is. It is frightening and undesirable, in lots and lots of ways. But I think just by being reality, that's a very clear cut definition.
Yeah, Wikipedia says dystopias characterized by rampant fear or distress, tyrannical governments, environmental disaster, or other characteristics associated with a cataclysmic decline in society.
So literally, just the
It's
2020.
literally just every single world disaster is kind of covered there, isn't it? Tyrannical governments, environmental disaster,
Floods, fires, plague. It's
This
biblical, really.
distinct themes include complete control over the people in a society through the usage of propaganda, heavy censoring information, and denial of free thought, worship. My God, this is too on the nose. Worshipping an unattainable goal, the complete loss of individuality, and heavy enforcement of conformity. Wow.
That's quite phenomenal. That's quite amazing. That's depressing, Sam. Do you want to like jump into our 1980s time capsule, our safe place, and maybe just get away from like the world for a minute?
We can try. We can try.
We can
I'm
try.
not sure that we're going to be able to break through that. The malaise that we're living in, but we'll give it a go.
Well, if anyone can get us there, Sam, it's 1986. Danny DeVito.
Yes, the lens of Ruthless People.
Exactly. Right. So, for podcast purposes, I'm going to do the intro. We'll help Sam later, as this is in audio form.
Let's do it.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Imaginary Movie Podcast, a podcast where we talk about invariably movies from 1986 to escape the true horror and literal dystopian nature of the world that's happening around us. My name's David, and I both love and despise the gauche house that Danny DeVito lives in this movie. And I really, really am on the fence on it. Like, I love it. I'm not sure you could live in it, but I love it.
That is a very, very good word. Well done. Well done. That's worth the £25,000 of debt that you went to university for, Dave. Congratulations.
Yeah, and I'm really chipping away at that.
Yeah, to the grave. My name's Sam.
To my knowledge, I will have paid that off shortly before the sun burns up.
Yeah. Oh, just what, 4 or 5 years? You're fine then. You're all good. Ruthless People, a film more outlandish than that Danny DeVito movie where he was experimenting with male pregnancy. What a weird film this is.
It's weird yet grounded. So obviously you've just mentioned the name of the movie, Sam. I want to just do a little bit of David story time, which is just for my own personal
Here we
gratification.
go. Mhm.
Um,
I'm gratified. I will be gratified at the end of this sentence. Go.
well, this is going to be the least interesting thing in the world, Sam, because I'm just going to recount why we did this movie.
No, please carry on.
Um,
I must be gratified.
This is a 1986 movie. The keen-eyed, our hordes of loyal fans will know that we have recently done a couple of 1986 movies.
Oh,
And the reason we did this is because on a list of the top grossing movies of 1986 for other podcast research, this movie came up, and I was like, huh, with Danny DeVito and Judge Reinhold and Bette Midler.
This is the top grossing movie of 1986.
Yeah, and I had never heard of it, and I'm a
Wow.
big fan of Danny DeVito. Big family movies. And we will get into why we hadn't heard of this movie. But I was just like, wow, that sounds really good. I bet we haven't heard of it because it's got like 4% on Rotten Tomatoes, or there's heinous jokes that you can't get away with anymore, or there's blackface or something like that. And no, this has got like 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's generally quite well regarded. Made tons of money, so people saw it, and then the world just forgot about it. This sometimes happens with movies. I think, especially this era of movie.
Yeah, I mean, right. Not to completely undercut your point straight away, but I don't think this was the top grossing movie in 1986. I think it was number 8.
I didn't say that. You said that.
No, I said that.
One of the top grossing
Right.
movies
Okay.
of 1996.
Okay. Fair enough.
86.
We'll check the audio record. So,
oh, he's going to do this bullshit again where he edits around to make it sound like he isn't the person in the wrong.
Hey, you want to sit and do editing for 200 plus episodes of a podcast, Dave? No, you don't, and nor could you. So I think you just shut the fuck up. So
I think me doing the intro is the same amount of work. It sounds like the same amount of work.
Yeah. So this is number 8, which is still quite amazing. I mean, 1986 is a great year for movies. We've got obviously like Top Gun is number 1 through Karate Kid Part 2, Aliens, and then at number 8, Ruthless People. But it still beats The Color of Money, which we've just done. It still beats Ferris Bueller's Day Off. We've also got, what have we got? Stand By Me and Police Academy 3, which is number 17, which is quite amazing.
Didn't Labyrinth come out in 96 as well? That was the movie we did last.
Yes, Labyrinth did, which was number 68. And what was
not one of the highest grossing movies.
So I think is that where our 1986 movies finish, isn't it? What was Footloose? Was that 84 maybe?
84.
Yeah, it would have been pre. I'm just going to check that actually, because it was 84. Yeah,
great. I'm glad to be vindicated.
Well, you got it wrong about Ruthless People being the top grossing movie, as we've just heard in the audio edit that I've just done. So, Dave, I can't trust a word you say.
Anyway, to get us off reading off Wikipedia, which is, interesting, and I'm certain there is like we could set some bots to really make us some cash by just reading Wikipedia articles. We've certainly in 250 episodes got enough like voice clips. Probably
since this, yeah, I could get you saying whatever I wanted, whatever I wanted.
Minimum effort. Anyway, so this is a
policies of Adolf Hitler. Go for it, Dave.
Not that podcast. We are not doing that. Sam, give me a plot summary and let's jump into this like really fun movie. I was about to say crazy, but I think actually this is like one of the more grounded, wacky movies we've done.
Wacky is a word. So in this wacky movie, a couple cheated by a vile businessman kidnaps the businessman's wife in retaliation, not knowing that their enemy is delighted that they did. I think that number 1, you get me a movie with Danny DeVito in. Immediately I'm interested. Immediately I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be fun, because Danny DeVito is one of those great, like, unaccountable Hollywood stars. Let's just say it. He doesn't look like he should be.
Can I just say, I think Danny DeVito looks fantastic in this.
He's handsome. He is handsome, but let's just...
and I don't think I've ever looked at Danny DeVito, no offense to the man, before and thought, well, he's not a bad looking guy.
Yeah, but he's not what you would consider to be, like conventional.
He's
about
14 inches shorter than your conventional Hollywood leading man.
4'10", and
Yeah.
like he was balding when he was in his late teens. So
Real case of the Joes.
yeah, yes. Speaking of our friend, but what we also get is we get Danny DeVito kind of like off the rails, and it's funny because I was thinking about like the Danny DeVito cinematic universe and how if you plot some of his roles ending basically with Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where he plays this horrible, like troll man, you can kind of see that you can see on the spectrum where he starts out and he's helping Arnie. As I said, he's experimenting with male pregnancy again with Arnie and Junior, and then we move on to Matilda, where he's starting to get a little bit more mean spirited. This is before that, so we're not quite there. You can see him after the events of this movie, really going for it and going into kind of like near child abuse, and then we move into the latter stage of the Danny DeVito cinematic universe, where he's uh, breaking out of sofas like in Always Sunny. So he's great. I love him, and I loved him in this. I thought he was just so dynamic and funny, and the energy he brought to every scene was amazing.
He plays a really good dirtbag, which he does like quite
Yes.
frequently in his movies. So this, pardon me, he's a scumbag businessman. He rips people off and tries to murder his wife. We'll get into that. In Twins, he's a scumbag grifter. Junior, he's a divorcee, so less of a scumbag in that one. But Matilda, he's a crooked car salesman.
Amazing. Love that film.
Like there's a lot of movies. I don't know if you've ever seen Throw Mama from the Train. I think that's the one. It's him and Billy Crystal.
I'm already in.
And it's a parody of Strangers on a Train.
Yeah.
Where this is now the podcast. I'm just going to talk about this film because it's like bizarre. It's a bizarre film. Billy Crystal's like an English language. He's an English teacher and he's teaching adults like story writing basically. And Danny DeVito is this depressed, weird man in his 40s who lives with his mother who he hates, and he gets it into his head that him and Billy Crystal have agreed to do the Strangers on a Train thing, where Billy Crystal will kill his mother, and Danny DeVito will kill Billy Crystal's ex-wife who's on a book tour. Now, so Danny DeVito pushes the ex-wife off a boat, and we think he's killed her. And the whole movie is then Billy Crystal kind of like catching up on this and being like, this lunatic wants me to kill his mother. And it's like this, again, very like this movie, actually, like really, really farcical. It's absolutely hilarious. But like, again, another really forgotten movie. But I think Danny DeVito plays these roles, these kind of like oddly psychotic and quite irredeemable like characters really, really well.
Yeah. And there's the kind of like comedic edge that he brings as well, I think is really important, isn't it, in a lot of his roles. And he does have some more serious ones, and like he's in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and stuff like that. Like, but really, the ones that you remember, the ones that really stick with you, are the more kind of comedic and maybe not even trying to be comedic, like in Batman, where he's the Joker, which is just like, wow,
I think
you
that
are
crosses comedic to like it's just
dystopian
a
as
Tim Burton character, yeah. Like
yeah,
it's just
yeah,
a Tim Burton character.
Tim Burton-y. That's just too
That's
Tim
a genre.
Burton-y.
That is a genre. Tim Burton is a genre.
Ugh, still I
But like, yeah,
can't do, yeah.
it's part of that is because he's quite disarming in that as a baddie, because he's quite a little guy. He's not physically threatening. He's quite funny and likable, which kind of again like maybe sort of like softens the fact that in this movie, I love how the start of this movie, and I was vaguely aware of the plot because I'd read about it on Wikipedia before we decided to watch it.
So you've not seen this
Uh,
before, no?
I hadn't seen this before. The only reason we decided to watch it is because I can't believe we haven't seen this. And then Ross wasn't here, so we just decided to watch it. And it happened to be streaming for free. Ding, 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 ding.
There we
That's
go.
the Imaginary Movie Podcast cheap bell.
Yeah, it's the lowest possible bar that we
Yeah.
and we achieved it.
Because there's odd movies we've come across lately where they're just not available to rent even. Anyway, this was on Disney Plus, so crack him. Disney pay us. But the start of this movie, the first movement is like I'm just gonna get the actor's name up because I can't remember it. The mistress, who is
Anita Morris plays
Anita
Carol.
Morris,
Yeah.
plays Carol, the mistress, and she's great in this as well. So she's Danny DeVito's mistress, and he's. We open the movie where they're at a restaurant. He's talking about how he's going to kill his wife, and then Carol is like trying to give him a hand job under the table. And I was like, oh, so this is what we're in for. Like minute one, like the very first scene of this movie. And he gets all hot and bothered and he's like announces, I'm going to go and kill my wife. And it's like, right, we are off to the races.
And
That's all we need to know.
He is chewing the scenery, isn't he? He really is like he's making the most of this.
They both are, Sam. I think that Anita
all
Morris
through
did a
the
fantastic
movie.
job of like just being really sexual with Danny DeVito, who like obviously is lapping it up. But it's kind of the crux of the whole movie. We don't even meet Bette Midler, who plays the wife, for like half an hour.
Yeah. Which is clever, isn't it? Because you kind of like you're given a lot of information about her, and that comes through the lens of Danny DeVito, but also when you go in the house and the interior design in this movie is just like amazing. The set
It's
design,
it's like Art Deco-y. It's
I don't know. I think maybe. I guess it's
I think
like
so.
it's
I did art and design at A level. I should know this.
yeah, I mean, you really shouldn't. That's not something that you shouldn't. You need to
I'd
know.
sound really clever if I did, though.
I don't know. I don't know if Art Deco is right, because that's more like 1920s kind of like, Great Gatsby, isn't it? I think it's more. It's like a. I don't know. It's just so quintessentially 1980s. So we get all of this.
It reminded
bright,
me of the
aggressive
3 guys and a 3 men and a baby.
Yes,
Flat.
we literally said that because at
Yeah.
the start, what we have missed is this great opening credits, and we watched this almost at the same time. So this is like the opening of Three Men and a Baby, not done by the same person.
I love an animated for no reason animated opening credits, especially this one where like all the characters' names, the cast names are being murdered like by cartoons, and it's. I would be interested to know how much that cost them because like that must have been like a lot more than you would usually spend on credits.
Yeah, but I think this is that there's a loss here that we've suffered in the opening credits. They set up the feel of the movie. Like before you know anything about it, before you see a single line of dialogue, opening credits used to give us like an essence of what was an essence of what was coming. Exactly, they give us that feel of like through the music and through this, and what we get is like a playfulness and also a bit sinister, and then just the loudness of this movie, because all throughout the film, it's the loudness of the characters. It's the set design, it's the cars, it's even the wacky tone is kind of reflected in these opening credits. And I think there's a real loss there that we don't have that anymore because of Ghostbusters. And is that a 1986 movie? No,
85 wasn't it? Or
85. Wow, there we go. Close. We've got an 80s thing going on. But I think this is a great opening to the movie. And you're right, we don't see Bette Midler. What do we think of Bette Midler in this? Because I think she's turned up to 12 in this movie, and I think that is almost the only way you could play this character.
Well, before we get to Bette Midler, I kind of thought I wouldn't like her, and then I did. If that makes any sense. When she first met her, I was like, well, she kind of deserves to be killed, doesn't she? Not deserves to be killed, but like I thought they were basically setting it up
Bette Midler as a person? You're a monster.
No, the character in this movie. They kind of set it up to be like it kind of could go either way. Where I really did think so. We see Judge Reinhold and his wife. I'm such a sexist pig.
Helen Slater plays Sandy.
Helen Slater, who great in this movie. Love her hair. That's a separate issue. I'll do her hair.
Easy.
Right. So when she falls down the stairs to the basement, I was like, oh, I really did think it would be. I can't think of another movie where this happens, but it does, where we would never actually meet the wife, where she would just die accidentally at the beginning.
Carry on.
I was talking, so maybe
Seamless.
you can find that later. I really did think that they would kill the wife early on, and we'd never meet her. And so I'm not sure who I thought Bette Midler was going to play. But Bette Midler is psychotic at the beginning of this, much like I guess most people would be in a kidnap situation if they got free.
She's like a caged animal, isn't she? She's like snarling at
The
them,
big
and
hair doesn't help. The big
the
hair, the big
hair.
mane of hair,
It
and the
is,
fat
and
suit she's wearing as well.
I know. Well, this is the thing. Like as the movie progresses, and she's doing a fitness routine, and I was like starting to, I was like, she looks different. Like, what's going on? Is it just the hair? They turned down the hair. They had done that, but also, yeah, they kind of like gradually reducing. I mean, I don't know how many weeks it was that she manages to shed 20 pounds, but it's really, it's really funny.
I think in the movie it can't be more than like
It's
a
a couple
week,
of weeks, isn't it?
2 weeks,
Yeah, maybe
maybe.
a couple of weeks. It's as a more general point, and let's not bother with the rest of the cast as individuals, but I think that this is a really, really sketch-like movie, and there's so many elements and story beats and just like scenes where you're like, where did this come from? Like, what is going on? Like, why are we doing this now? And I think actually that makes it really, really funny and really entertaining because you're not expecting half of the stuff. Like this later on, we get the bedroom killer, and it just comes out of nowhere. And you think, well, they're handing
It,
out these posters. What is? Where are you
it's a
going with
totally
this movie?
reasonable thing to say that this movie doesn't absolutely nail setup and payoff. You know, we talk about that a lot in movies that we cover. That a really, really great movie kind of pays off everything it sets up, and you know everything that happens is well set up. But I don't think it really like makes the film any worse. But it
I'm
definitely,
not complaining about it.
like you said, the bedroom killer, like he arrives, we see him 2 scenes later when he falls down the stairs and is killed, and it's like they got to the end of the movie and they thought we have to have someone for them to blame the
I'm
crimes on.
I know. I think I'm not complaining at all. I think this is an amazing part of the film is that you get this because they do set it up. They're handing out the leaflets, um, and it's mentioned I think 2 times before we get to see him. But they clearly knew what they wanted to do with him, and all through the movie, there's all these things like the police chief, where Bill Pullman, and for ages we were like, "Who is that? Who is that?" Don't Google it. Don't Google it. And then I had to give up, and of course it's Bill
There's never
Pullman.
in 1,000 years would you guess that's Bill Pullman because
I
he's
just
so young.
He's so young, but they just that vacant look of Bill Pullman on his face. Yeah, that is Bill,
Yeah.
definitely Bill. So the point where he's filming the prostitute and what we learn is the police chief, which is an amazing reveal that I did not see coming because I'm an idiot. But when they're filming that, and you think, like, this is a funny scene, and okay, but then actually that scene becomes the bedrock of the movie because all throughout the film, everything that happens because um, Anita Morris's character thinks she's witnessing a murder by watching it because of this guy's an idiot, and then the police chief figures it, is like, oh shit, they got me
It's
having
it's
sex with a
all kind of
prostitute.
based on the screaming, isn't it? That is good setup and payoff where the police chief says to this prostitute, who, by the way, I looked at her filmography a bit. Like, this is her career, is just playing. Like, she has 4 or 5 roles, which is prostitute in car.
Oh my god.
Like just has a niche. And talking about how raunchy this movie is, like we see some 80s tits in this movie.
Oh yes. Yeah. For
But
the dads.
we set up there that like the police chief's like, oh, I like women to be loud, so we've set up that she's going to be screaming, and that's why Bill Pullman's character, who is the stupidest person to like ever existed in a movie we've watched,
Yeah. Yeah.
like thinks she's being murdered, and then Anita Morris, the Carol, I think the character name, then she basically is like, can't, it's an 80s camcorder, and she's been told it's a murder, so they don't watch it, and I think that works really well in terms of like why they believe that it's the murder tape. We also get a really, really raunchy scene with Dustbuster. That's what they're called.
The
The little
Dustbuster.
miniature
The little
handheld
Hoover.
vacuum, little Hoover, where we have like a sex scene with her and Bill Pullman, and then there's this noise, and then she pulls out this dustbuster from under and you're like, what the fuck?
Sucking. It's a really, yeah, there's so much of this. There's so much of these what you think is a throwaway gag ends up actually being like the foundational plot of the movie. And without these, the police chief thinking that he's been busted with a prostitute, and actually it's a murder tape that she's given in. That small scene ends up unlocking so many things, and this is what I really like about this film, is that there's so many of these little what feel like sketches that actually end up being so critical to the rest of the film, but you don't really realize it until the end. You don't really realize that the bedroom killer is going to be in the one they set up for the crime that they he's already dead, so who cares.
I
And
hate to burst your bubble, Sam, because I don't disagree that all of this works, but you do see a lot of that coming.
all right,
Like,
you
when they're
do
filming the guy
because
in
you're
the
a
car,
genius.
when you're filming the guy in the car, I was like, well, that he's going to have to turn out to
Yeah,
be somebody.
but it's not the point of the film. It's not a reveal, is it? It's not like I'm shocked, but it's clever. I think it's clever writing, and that's what I appreciate about this movie, is that you end up going, right, that's a funny little way that they've managed to subvert your expectations, or not, depending on how stupid you are. And I think without that, you end up with what could actually be quite like you could end up it being what I thought this film would be. After about 15 minutes, I was going, oh, this is going to get really tired really quick. How gleeful can this man be for the next hour and a half that his wife has been kidnapped? How are they going to move it on from like,
Well,
we
it's
need to
good
have some kind of
comedy. It's
challenge for
perfect
him?
use of comedy where it's that farcical thing where two people are talking, usually on the phone, about different things, but in a like, but no, neither of them realizes it. So
Yeah,
we have it with Anita and the police chief, where she tells him to arrest Danny DeVito, and he's like, "Why would I arrest him? Okay, whatever you want, just please don't
don't release the
release
tape.
this." And then you have in my mind, like I really do think this is the most powerful and funniest scene in the movie, is when Danny DeVito gets the tape, and before this, watches it and thinks, my girlfriend sent me this because it's sexy. And I'm like, what, that fat police chief having sex with a hooker in a car? And he rings her and says in a really like aroused fashion, oh yeah, I'm going to do this to you. I'm going to find you and I'm going to do this to you. And she fucking just like throws his phone away. She's like, he's going to kill me. I just think it's perfect. Again, farce of like, everyone's acting their hearts out, and it's just this like completely. There's no tension as such because we know that Danny DeVito isn't going to kill her, but it's just that reaction is funny. I do wish we saw more of Morris and Pullman, because they do feel like they kind of only come in the movie to sort of put a spanner in the works, and you could maybe have done something more with that. But maybe I just liked the characters. I want to see more of them.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not super developed, is it? It's not like
It's not
it's
like
not like
super
we're
well baked. It's not.
no, and that's fine, and that's absolutely fine. That's the thing that I think, in a lot of ways, we don't really get movies like this anymore. We don't really get movies that are just kind of happy to be fairly throwaway, but also not necessarily just be utter
I think we
trash.
do, Sam, but they go straight to Netflix and we aren't watching them.
Yeah, well, that's the same thing we said about like Scary Movie and other throwaway movies. Interestingly, though, let's go back to the director of this, Zucker, Abrams and Zucker, abbreviated to Zaz. Apparently, I'm sure nobody calls them that. They wrote this movie and directed it, and were just the real vehicles for this film. They're famous, probably most famous for Airplane, Naked Gun, and that type of like slapsticky, a little bit less plot based movies than this one. This is probably more of their like more of a plot, more of a farce. And I think you can really see like you can see the DNA of Naked Gun in this. You can see the DNA of like it just being really, really dialed up to 11. They did the Police Squad TV series, and then the pilot, and then did the film after this movie. So you can, I like it when you can see the progression that directors are going through to get to the point where they're like releasing probably what their most famous work, Naked Gun.
Yeah, it's interesting as well that I think the initial story for this was written by the same guy who wrote My Cousin Vinny, um,
You can feel
which
that,
is
can't you?
yeah. So obviously, like you said, the Zaz, that's the collective group name,
Ooh.
directed and produced it, and obviously the script will have changed a lot, but the initial sort of elevator pitch spec script, yeah, was the same guy who wrote My Cousin Vinny, which I think is interesting because it's kind of like, again, you look at that comedy and how a film's sort of key to not be massively serious, even though it's like concerns quite serious subject matter,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the kind of lightness to it, which a lot of
Yeah.
these movies of this era had. It's kind of ticks a lot of boxes in terms of, it's going to get people out to go to the cinema because realistically, if you saw this in the cinema, you're not going to go home and be like, "Oh, I've wasted my time," because you were entertained. There's some bits for the dads. It's not, boring, fun movie. How long is it actually? I didn't even once again notice.
140, I think. 94 minutes
94
apparently.
minutes.
So yeah, not far off. Yeah, yeah, and there's like also, I think, as much as it is, isn't anything that's too sophisticated. There's enough to keep you going though. There's enough to take you from scene to scene and think, where the fuck are they going with this? Because it almost all the characters, I think, have like good enough arcs, other than Danny DeVito's, maybe which they resolve by chucking him off a pier, and then it's a good metaphor for how little you've actually managed to like tie up his end of the story, which is
I don't know. They do. It's all there. It's all there. I just think they're not overly concerned in having the Poirot standing around the drawing room with cigars, explaining
yeah,
how the
exactly.
crime's been resolved, which I think is good actually, because ultimately you could have her saying, "Well, you see, Danny DeVito, what's his character's name? This is not important. You see, Danny DeVito, you've all of your money and your Rolex and your ring, and because all the money he takes out to pay the ransom at the very end is his money because he can't access the wife's money.
The rest of it's locked
Um,
away. Yeah.
so, in theory, if she divorces him, and there's this big publicized paper thing of him having an affair, under American laws, like he gets nothing, and he's got nothing left because he's used it all to pay the ransom. But I do agree this movie could have gone anywhere, and it's not until about halfway through the movie that they clearly establish who the protagonists are. like,
Mm-hmm.
I love all the bits of Danny DeVito like doing his salesman thing, and he's like, I don't have $500,000.
Yeah.
I don't really have $50,000. 10,000, and he just doesn't go. And there's that reaction of like,
He's
because he wants
haggling.
them to kill her.
He's haggling with his wife's family, which she finds out later on and is outraged by. And there's so many of those. There's so many of those funny scenes where Bette Midler is like, you see her coming around from being this really entitled and boorish loudmouth, my husband, and all this stuff, to actually she becomes a bit more of a rounded character who you kind of start to like. Whereas at the start you
And
think, oh,
the
she's
movie
she's
tells us that in like typical movie fashion, which is that she loses loads of weight. Ooh, thin
yeah,
people
I
better.
know the
Ooh,
thinness. Oh,
her
good
hair's
lord.
better. She looks better. She's nicer. She starts dressing like more down to earth way, which like I guess is movie language to an extent, but and I'm not saying it's like a huge flaw of the movie, but like we maybe could have done that. That maybe could have
Well,
been
yeah, well,
less about that.
we've got to have the Hollywood 1986
Oh yeah,
shortcuts.
there were way worse movies. There are worse movies like made today about fat shaming and things like that than this. I
Well,
don't think we should let it go past us either.
absolutely not. But fuck you, it's the 80s. This is how else are we going to determine people's value? By the way they look and dress.
Smoking is usually the big one, isn't it?
Much smoking in this movie? I don't think so, actually. Oddly.
No, I think I can't think of any really. And did he have a cigar at one point? Maybe.
Maybe it would. That would read, wouldn't it? That would read.
But smoking is your usual 80s giveaway that someone's a bad guy.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of bad guys, Judge Reinhold and Heron Slater as the Kessler family, like I do think this is slightly underwritten in terms of like, okay, so someone stole, like Sam Stone stole this idea from you about like clothes or whatever, the miniskirt thing, and so middle, we're gonna kidnap his wife, and I just thought it was. I thought it was, again, I'm not. This isn't a criticism though, because I think it's actually really, really lean. I don't think you need to know any more than that.
No. I would maybe have said, just maybe from a production point of view, maybe a stack of bills in this kitchen when they're having a fight. Like maybe a big letter that says repossession on it, just to maybe
Yes,
give us some incentive as to why they've gone
a
to
bit
this
more
extreme step.
urgency. Yeah,
Yeah, like a
yeah.
ticking clock. Like we've got 30 days until our house is repossessed, or because it's great that they get all this money at the end
That's
of
a
this
good
movie.
note.
But like,
That's a good note, Dave.
if it was, it's to save our house, and we aren't necessarily out to get ours. We just don't want to be, we're good people and we've been taken advantage of, and we don't want to literally be in the poorhouse. But again, like you said, Sam, it's really lean. We jump into this movie. There's very little exposition. We move, and we've met all of our main characters. The kidnapping happens like before the start of the movie. It's
Yeah,
clever.
we don't
Like, we
even
don't see it, which I think
get
is
to see
good,
it.
because I don't think they could you have the scene where Bette Midler tries to escape from the cellar because these guys are really inept at kidnapping, because obviously they're not kidnappers. And that scene kind of leads you to believe that you maybe couldn't have sold them actually managing to kidnap this woman.
Yeah, because she's wild. Because she's yeah, absolutely wild. But they're fun, aren't they? Like the Kesslers are fun, and I like their back and forth. The Judge Reinhold's doing a kind of good, crazy, but also caring husband act,
And
and again,
Goofy when he chloroforms himself, I think that's very funny. Again, good
totally,
physical comedy.
totally goofy, totally sketch show, Naked Gunish. The Speaking of arcs, though, and again, pretty much every character has one that's paid off. I think we've got this uh, uh, stereo salesman thing going on with him, and again, you're like, where are we going with this movie? Like, why is this here? Why is this in here? I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because you completely bought by it, and then later on they pay it off when he doesn't want to rip off the young guy, with a pregnant girlfriend.
But they pay it off. I wouldn't argue that pays it off.
I think it does, because I think it shows actually that these guys, Judge Reinhold is a good guy who's just trying to look.
It's
after.
a bit of a save the cat moment. I will agree.
Yeah.
But for me, it kind of like is a, why do we have these scenes? I get that he needs a workplace, literally, for the cops to come. That's a funny scene. I like the scene where he basically says to this woman that her boyfriend's got a tiny dick. That's really funny. And the later scene, again, like, it is a good save the cat moment. For me, it doesn't really connect massively well with the rest of the plot.
Yeah, I don't
know. A bit like Morris and Pullman's thing. Doesn't massively tie back into the main storyline. And again, it's not a weakness of the film, which is a 94-minute comedy movie. Like, we shouldn't be digging in too much about whether this should have been written like an Oscar winner, because it shouldn't have been. But I just think that, again, you could tighten that up maybe a little bit.
It's I guess it's maybe take out one of the scenes, take out something that, or shorten a little bit. But I think it's important, though. I think I disagree quite a lot, because I think without them, you don't necessarily have the attachment that you need to care about these characters, because each one of them gets this arc, gets this this movement from, I'm going to do this, and it's going to improve my life somehow. Like Judge Reinhold wants to get rich, but the reason he wants to get rich, the reason he's trying to rip these guys off, rip Sam Stone off, is because his wife was scorned. So straight away you're like, okay, it's slightly different. I think it's a great note about like the repossession notice or something. That would be really good. That would give us a little bit more urgency. The Helen Slater's character, Sandy Kessler, she's kind of like a little bit more passive, doesn't necessarily have maybe as good as an arc, but kind of just wants to be recognized, kind of wants to be able to have a moment where she is using her talent in designing
Yeah.
clothes, and she gets that. She gets that at the end.
And she's never
With
bought into the kidnapping, which is like a
she's
consistent
really nice, isn't she?
character beat. Yeah. She's never really bought into the kidnapping, and you feel like it's something she agreed to and then was like immediate, like, this isn't good. So her letting Bette Midler go really feels like it's a good character moment for her.
Yeah.
But yeah, she is a bit passive, and it's a bit like his wife.
Yes.
Like we get a lot of that in 80s movies. But I think it works reasonably well. And again, you kind of do need some good characters in this movie. There's a weird thing in this movie. I don't know if you noticed, and this is what Ross was here because it's a bit of pedant cast. Why do the police have his tire imprints from his van? Like they show up at his work
because I think
until the
when
police commissioner tells them to arrest Danny
yeah,
DeVito, they
they're
think he's
investigating
the
that.
number one suspect because they've
Well, they
got these
don't.
tire things. And I think
We as you
why?
said before, we don't get to see it, but they presumably brought the van along to the kidnapping at the house, and so they drove either through some mud or whatever else, or over the
No.
grass.
I understand that, Sam. I just don't understand. You need both of them. It's like fingerprints. You need the impression of someone's fingers when you know who they are,
So
as
they
well as
looked
the
up.
fingerprint at the crime scene.
They looked up. They can, because it's the 80s. They looked up who had bought tires, this specific set of tires, and presumably there isn't that many who bought this specific set of, like 47-inch, blah blah blah, whatever it is, and
I
thus,
don't.
I mean,
I don't
that,
buy that.
that's
I have
no,
no.
that's
I don't buy
complete.
it for a good reason, Sam. Hear me out here. Like the police don't have access to a database of everyone who's bought tires in the city. Hear
They
me
might
out.
do. They might do.
They are absolutely. They might do now. Even so, they absolutely don't. Right. What I think is that again, you could have had maybe a scene here where maybe you have Danny DeVito. You know the scene where he's explaining to that police officer about like being a salesman and ripping people off.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
kind of maybe you can put into that scene like him telling this police officer like proudly about how he ripped off the Kesslers, like in a
Mm-hmm.
roundabout way, and be like, "Oh, there was this young yuppie couple, and they came to me with this idea, and I, not stole it, but like you can have him laying that out as like a thing of public record, so that the police would be like, right, we've looked into people who might have a grudge against this guy. There's this couple who tried to file a suit against him about this patent, right?
Yeah.
And it didn't go anywhere. But they maybe go, the police say, we know you've got beef with him, so we checked it out and they match. And then you can still have the whole movement of the movie. And it's a really minor thing to be pedanty about, Sam. But
It
like
is.
even in movie land, the police do not have a database in 1986 with all the tire patterns and everyone who's bought those tires.
No, but you could do some. You could. I don't know. I think this is. I think you're right. Yes, that's fine. I'm happy to concede that. I just think I
It would
don't think
just tie
it's.
again. It would tie everything
It,
back in together. If
yeah.
it was established that
But what
that
else?
she
How
was a
else are you going
budding
to tie
fashion
him?
designer.
How else are you going to tie him to the location? CCTV? Nope.
Nope.
That's not a thing. Maybe a witness. I think you're right. Yeah, you could
Again,
definitely
it's
just
just like, and it's not necessary because it's not that kind of movie, and it's fine. And ultimately, it's trying to be funny, and I think it achieves that.
yeah.
So
But then
you can
that's not
forgive
really
the
a
little
joke, is
things.
it? The tire thing doesn't really end up with a meaningful
No, but
joke
it's like
that's
it's
related
the
to it.
plot
So
device for the police to be there,
yeah,
for
I'm
him to
agreeing with you.
Judge Reinhold to be hanging out the window,
Yeah, that was what I'm
and you get
saying.
the good. Everyone loves a toilet joke. Everyone loves a joke about someone shitting on the toilet
Yeah,
and other people being uncomfortable.
this was the most Naked Gun uh, moment for me. This is the most
When they walk
airplane
underneath him, yeah, definitely.
when he's hanging out the window, and even before that, when they they're making all the noises and stuff, and you think, okay, this is like we're getting into that real slapsticky feel, and that's fine. Like, actually, I think they don't go fully into it. They just kind of lean into that a little bit. The rest of the time, it's more farcical. It's a bit more kind of wordy, and we're not quite that broad. I think that's the right decision for this movie.
There is
Otherwise,
a
you
lot of
could.
broad. There is a lot of really broad stuff in this. The police chase at the end I thought was particularly broad, with like
Yeah.
15 police cars just following in a line and they're stopped at traffic lights. I thought that was really funny.
When
And
they've
like
got all
again,
of
quite naked gunny.
very naked gunning, when they've got all of they've all got like wires, in their ears, and there's like it's about 40 people all in different roles, like all with these in it. It does feel
Yeah, and there's
very
like 50
sketchy.
police with rifles. Like I always love that scene. Again, it's the naked gun scene where freeze, and it's like 45 guns pointing at this person from like 3 feet away. We get a couple of those again. Like you can draw a straight line, like Frank Drebber. You know,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
those are really, again, like because I hadn't looked at the trivia for this, so I didn't know that it was a naked gun connection. But there are a few like relics of that kind of movie in here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I do, as the film progresses and we get to like the point where he's dropping the value, it goes from 500,000 down to 50,000, down to 10,000, and then Bette Midler's
How
response.
upset Midler is. Jeez.
It's not what you want to hear, is it? It's not what you want to hear, to be fair. That your value has
No, and
been
I guess like
bargained with.
especially by this point, as she knows she's not going to be murdered. But yeah, the idea that he's pretended he hasn't got 500,000, then he hasn't got 50.
Yeah.
Oh, 10, I don't know about 10. Oh, maybe.
And
The
when he
bank's
says,
closed.
a
What am I
bad
going to do?
salesman always lowers the price. And then he does
Yeah.
exactly that. And he's, you can see he's going, yeah, I've got this guy. What a schmuck. That's the type of response, isn't it? It's pretty funny. Again, Danny DeVito, just so good. So good. So many, like his descent into being this cartoonishly evil, maniacal guy of just like, I
And
just don't
they
care. I want
kind
her
of
to die.
realize that, don't they? Because I don't think Danny DeVito was this guy in '86. I haven't like expansively dived into his filmography, but a lot of the movies we've mentioned are after this. But they were obviously filming it and being like, "This guy's really good. More of him." Because we get the whole like dog plot line as well, which is literally just Danny DeVito and two dogs on screen.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing else. And again, that feels like an executive note of like, yeah, we need more of Danny DeVito because he's the funniest thing about this movie.
Yeah, well, this you're right.
X2, Adolf.
At two, at two. You're right in terms of the where this sits. I think because before this, we've got what is it? Excuse me while I read Wikipedia, but it is more of those serious movies. It's like Romancing the Stone, Taxis in the TV series. Like there's more of that. Cuckoo's Nest is 75, and then after this point, it's really like Twins and Throw Mama from the Train, as you said, Batman, Last Action
This is
Hero.
breakthrough into like mainstream roles, I think. Whereas earlier he did a lot of supporting roles
Yeah,
in more serious movies, or like any actor breaking through, like any role you can get. And then this movie feels like the Danny DeVito vehicle that we needed to get him into the kind of the limelight.
He's
And
in
he
Hercules, isn't he?
absolutely
I love him
kills
in
it.
Hercules. The Disney's
Yeah,
Hercules.
he's very
He's so
funny
good
in
in
that.
that. Very good in that.
He's just generally like really, really funny. He's got good comedic timing. I wouldn't have said there's much good physical comedy in this movie from him. It's all acting, it's all him on the phone or like facial expressions and stuff. I think because it's really hard to, like just from a logistic standpoint, because of the fact that he's like over a foot shorter than most of the rest of the cast. It's really hard to shoot like physically funny scenes with them all in frame because of the scale issue. I don't know whether you agree with that, just from what we see in this movie. We only actually see him walking around or running around like 3 or 4 times, maybe.
Yeah.
Every other time he's sat behind a desk or a table.
The same challenge as shooting the Hobbits and Gandalf and Lord of the Rings. Like you
We
have
didn't
to
have
say.
that technology then. Peter Jackson wasn't around to do that for us.
Sorry, Danny. Sorry, you're a great guy. We love you. We love you. All 4 foot of you. This is based very roughly, or inspired at least, off a real kidnapping of Patty Hearst, who was the granddaughter of the Randolph Hearst, the American newspaperman.
Yeah.
She was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army, which was a left-wing vanguard group in the 70s, who basically were like
Kidnappings were huge back in the
fucking
day.
kidnapping. So they said, "Oh, well, give us a the ransom." She ended up kind of no, joining their group, and even did bank robberies with them, and was like, and then convicted in this in the and in jail, was released. Sorry, her sentence was commuted by Carter, and then she was pardoned by Clinton. Then she wrote a book about this where she admitted to many more crimes, and the FBI were like,
Can't
we
prosecute
might
your
actually have a
crimes.
look at this because you can't just fucking admit to do this type of stuff. I don't think she was ever brought down again for it. But there are it's a very good read if you go to Wikipedia and look up
It's
Patty Hearst. It's quite
interesting, like
fascinating.
kidnapping history, because like quite famously there was the Limburg baby. It was a big kidnapping, really high profile.
Kidnapping and
Uh,
murder, yeah, with a ransom. Yeah,
yeah, I don't really want to get into that side of it. I just thought I'd mention it as like a really high profile kidnapping, because again,
yeah.
like you don't really, it's a thing you see in TV all the time, but you don't really hear too much about people being kidnapped for money, like in this
It's a
movie.
lot
And
of work, isn't it? Like as we see
it's
in
a lot
this
of work, but it
movie.
used to be really, really like not common exactly, but I can't remember the name of it. There was this billionaire, well, millionaire at the time, whose grandson was kidnapped. And again, I think maybe that this has led into inspiring this movie, because the grandfather basically was renowned for being cheap. Like he used to respond
John
to
Paul
letters by
Getty
writing
the
on.
third.
Yeah, he used to respond to letters by writing on the back of letters, and he had a payphone installed in his house, so the staff couldn't make like long distance calls in his house because he was that cheap. But I think he pretty much said, "No, I'm not paying that." Initially, when they
So it started at 17 million, and his grandfather was reluctant to pay. After John Paul Getty's the third severed ear was received by a newspaper, the grandfather negotiated a payment of 2.2 million. This
and
happened in
that's kind of like this movie, isn't it?
1973.
It's
It
like
really is. He was released after 5 months and developed an addiction to drugs and alcohol, leading to an overdose and stroke, which led
you
him
always have to bring
severely.
in the really depressing facts.
I'm just reading what it says on
Here's
Wikipedia.
a really interesting thing, Sam, and
Fuck
this is
me,
the
that
last
is
Wikipedia reading bit.
bleak.
They agreed to pay 2.2 million. Um, the grandfather, he agreed to pay
Paid it in
the
pennies.
no. He worse. He agreed to pay the maximum amount of money was like $272,000, because that's as much as he could write off for tax.
Oh my god.
He then loaned the rest of the money to his son, the father of the boy being kidnapped, at 4% interest.
Are you
It's
joking?
phenomenal. Like, no, I'm literally not joking. That is literally a fact. So again, I think a lot of that goes into informing this movie of like,
Holy
yeah, kidnappings
shit.
can be silly, and like, let's take this, which is like terrifying, but let's take it and like make a farce out of it. And we have this, real kidnapping, but fake everything else. And Danny DeVito's gleefulness, and he's negotiating down because he wants them to kill her, and he's like, I don't think you're really going to do it. You almost want him to say like, well, send me a finger and we'll talk. Do you know what I mean? You almost need him to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where we get like I think this is a great example of taking something like that, which as we're learning live on air is fucking depressing and horrible. And actually just making it really funny and making it real light. And you can see how this would still be in the zeitgeist at the time. Like this is a few years later than the examples we're talking about. But maybe a good like way that America was dealing with rich people getting kidnapped. Other than celebrating, we were just like, we're like, shit, we better make movies about this.
Well, it's just again like it's a cool like we talk about elevator pitches a lot, and in fact in this episode, and it's a really cool idea of like, yeah, well, what if a guy's wife got kidnapped, but he'd been planning to murder her just before she was kidnapped, and you're like, right, that's a movie, and
Yeah,
obviously then they go and make it.
yeah, yeah. Made by Touchstone Pictures, who
Yes, you got the
is
great Touchstone logo at the beginning.
yeah the film, who is the kind of Disney offshoot that lets them make like R-rated movies and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
raunchy movies like this,
Our
which, by
favorite,
the way,
go on.
is why we haven't seen this. Um, there's too
Yes,
much sexual suggestion and there's too much nudity in this movie, really, for it to be, and obviously there's a dead guy at the end, for it really to be like a BBC evening movie in this country. So I think
it,
really that's why we didn't see it, is because it's not the sort of movie they go out and buy, because it's not a family film.
literally not going to get on TV, is it? Ever.
No,
Which is there you go. So how else would we have watched this other than finding it on Netflix, or maybe DVDs? But again, that's still a lot of steps.
DVDs.
Just back to Touchstone a little bit, because it's quite amazing actually, the cultural impact of this studio. Armageddon, Pretty Woman, Pearl Harbor, Signs, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, as all the way down the list. We get like so many big movies, so many movies that are like proper popcorn cultural touchstones, hey, that are able to like bring in the dollar, and you think, Jesus Christ, Disney knows what they're doing, don't they?
These are the movies that kept Disney afloat during the bad times.
Yeah,
Before
just like
they
this
just owned
movie, which
everything.
which made like $71 million off a 9 to 13 million budget, and
Yeah,
that's amazing. That's amazing
it's
because it's
it's interesting. Like, even just look at the credits, it's kind of notable how I don't know if you noticed. So you've got like starring Danny DeVito as, and then Judge Reinhold as, and then um or sorry, with, and then it's like, and starring Bette Midler at the end of that, and then we have more actors. And it's interesting, obviously, because she was quite a big, I think
yes,
the biggest name in the movie at the time. So it's interesting that like we talked about other actors like that guy in Ocean's 11 who wasn't credited because he wanted to be a starring role.
yes, yeah, yeah.
And Don Cheadle.
Don't you? Yeah,
We
got it.
couldn't remember his name last week either.
No.
And it's interesting how obviously certain stars like they can demand, like, and it seems so stupid, but like they can demand certain billing.
Yeah, because she'd done the same year she did Down and Out in Beverly Hills, uh, Jinxed as well, which I think I've heard of. So
I
she's a
think
big
her
star, isn't
star was
she?
very much like Danny DeVito's was on the rise. Obviously, I think this was Bill Pullman's first role, or one of the first. Judge Reinhold had been in a couple of things, but again, I don't think he ever really was like a star of movies. It was always, and with Judge Reinhold.
Yeah,
Noctra with Judge Reinhold. Again, Arrested Development has cemented him into the cultural consciousness there. But like Bette Midler was the name that you would know,
big
you know?
Broadway star. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's where I think this whole movie is just like, in a lot of ways, it's a sum of its parts, isn't it? You think you bring all these people together, you bring, as you say, a good elevator pitch, you bring together a really strong cast, and you kind of just like, it feels like it would have been quite a collaborative environment for working on. Like, we're just going to film stuff and see what happens. We're not going to be too tightly bound to the script, and that ends up actually, like, I think the creativity and freedom that it feels like there was in this is what we see on screen. So we're
You let your actors choose scenery,
yeah,
like, and they do in every scene,
yeah,
especially with like the amount of phone calls we have in this movie. Very, very rarely do we see any of our characters in the same room, which makes it so easy to film, like relatively, because you don't need everyone on set. You can just
yeah.
have Danny DeVito
Quicker,
in a
more in
room,
it. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And
and then
that's
you put
where,
it together, and that's, we haven't mentioned it. Obviously, the editing's pretty solid as well to make that pull off.
yeah. And I started off by saying I don't think we get films like this anymore. And it's not even the content. It's more that feel. It's more the having split screens. When two people are on the phone, just that feeling of like that there's an unseriousness to this movie that I think even in modern comedy films, it's still like, yeah, we're laughing, but we're still following like pretty structured plot beats, and we're not really, we're not bringing in like wacky. The wackiness, I think, is what we're missing from like a lot of modern comedy films. It's all just a little bit too self-serious, which is what we talked about before. And I think that's what I loved about this, is I didn't know where it was going. I was shocked and surprised all the way through this movie. I was like, "What the fuck are you doing, movie?" And that's a great thing when it works. When it's actually firing all cylinders and you don't know what to expect. That's a good place to
Yeah,
be.
man. It's this sort of movie isn't made anymore, and it's black comedies. We've talked about black comedies as well. Are a
Your
really
wheelhouse.
I don't even know if it is. They were really polarizing. It's a really polarizing genre because so often it doesn't work. I would say this is almost in this in the vein of like a spoof movie, almost. I think black comedy is kind of like a stretch because it's only a black comedy because it's about a kidnapping. Um, another movie
Yeah,
we
it's
should
not
do,
too
which is about
dark,
a
is it?
kidnapping, is the John Candy film "Who's Harry Crumb," and that's just an out and out comedy. But the kidnapping's real and it's much more bleak. But like, do you know what I mean? That's not a black comedy, whereas this is because it's so farcical, and you have the comedy
Yeah,
there. Um,
in grand Hollywood tradition as
but
well with the
I'm
farce.
glad we watched this because it's kind of like not filled a gap, but I always like discovering these movies that nobody's talking about. I've never ever heard anyone mention this movie as like this is a really good movie, and I've never seen it flash up on anything. And like I said, we literally wouldn't have found it if it wasn't for the podcast.
No, and that's why I do this podcast, regardless
We're gonna
of
watch every movie from 1986.
just you stop us, uh, regardless of like the tens of thousands of people who are cheering us on and giving us such a positive response to this. I
We're
can
like the
barely
Beatles.
walk.
When we got off a plane, you know about it.
I can't walk down the street without being recognised for my hot take on Pirates of the Caribbean previous episode.
Which a movie we have not done.
Is it not? Oh shit!
Wait, did we do the first one?
I don't know. I have
I don't think we
no
did.
idea.
But it's a good thing that we also have a good handle on things that we have talked about.
Yeah,
Um,
but this is the type of content people want. Us misremembering things. That's the hot stuff. That's what people just. That's what they give us that sweet Patreon money. Patreon.com/
it's imaginary Patreon,
imaginary
Sam. It's on
Patreon.
brand. It doesn't exist. Just like
Okay,
our audience and just like our quote unquote quality. It doesn't exist. It's imaginary.
effort, drive, ability, talent,
Talent,
knowledge,
more talent.
talent.
But no, it's nice to dive into these 80s movies which make us forget about the literal World War III, which may or may not be happening like as you listen to this.
And if it's not
Um,
World War III, it's a resurgent pandemic. If it's not resurgent pandemic, it's economic destruction. If it's not economic destruction, then we're left with actually like movies are a bit shit now. That's not great. So let's just live in
oh, baby, 2022. Woo!
the past. It's like kids, Marty. Back to 1985.
Oh, if only. Back to the 50s. No, not the 50s. Jim
God.
Crow, and it's not the 50s.
Well, we'd be
not the
okay,
50s.
but I think we wouldn't want
White
to
men,
necessarily.
yes, we would be okay.
I don't think we want to inflict that.
I think we look a bit too much like beatniks to go back to like the 1950s.
Yeah, beard. Get a shave and cut your hair. That's where.
I'm sorry, time is doing my haircuts for me at this point.
Just, yeah. Slowly and but still noticeable, I would say. Dave.
Slowly but uniformly.
Just don't tip your head forward. That's just a trick. Always be up on that.
I think the back's all right.
My eyes. The sun just glinted off it.
I saw Ross at the weekend, obviously. I presume we've wrapped up the main episode. I saw Ross at the weekend, and he had the audacity to like sit there and make fun of my hairline. A man who bicks his head twice a week, and he's telling me about how thin my hair is. He was bald. He had less hair than I have now.
I think
15
every
years ago when I
time
met him.
I think every time we've seen you recently, you've kept the American football cap on. So I'll be inspecting your hairline just to see.
It's bad. It's bad. You can see it's bad on the podcast. Look at all that face.
Well, hold on. I'm just going to put you full. Can I just? There we go. Full screen for Dave. Lean forward. Run your hands through it. Oh yeah, that's it.
Oh, that's some
slow
thinning
that
white
down.
man hair.
Ooh, that's a bit close.
Oh, see scalp there, Sam. Oh, that's not
Yeah,
good.
mine's bad. Look at this.
Yeah,
Gaps.
it's fine. We'll all look like a 6-pack of eggs before long. Let's not worry about it.
It's a good podcast name.
We've got other things to worry about.
War, pandemic, economic collapse.
Hairy eggs.
Yep. All right, let's leave it there. So long. Still here.